Welcome to the UIUC Talkshow. Our goal with this show is to introduce you to the most interesting people with the most interesting ideas. Today we have Mr. Arya. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We're really excited to talk to you, and hopefully we can get some of your ideas out and, have a fun conversation and to make you a little happier.
Do I look in this camera?
No, you can just look at me. Just the camera is just for the show or whatever. But in reality, we were on Saturday. We were going to this stargazing thing, and I remember I asked you two things. We were talking about two things, and what you said was like, "Wow, this is like I don't see many people who think like this very often." And I was like, "Okay, I want to talk to this guy." And it turns out you guys knew each other since childhood. Meaning, meaning when you decided to come to the U.S.
Yeah.
So that's good. So I want to start with something that I'm very curious about. Because that's a question I think a lot about. So what would be the most surprising or exciting scientific discovery imaginable?
That's a hard question to answer because the current trend for science is that you either prove something that's currently believed is wrong, and then you try to find, if this is wrong, good. What do I do now? So, if you just want like a big thing, maybe the cosmic neutrino background. So it's like, do you guys know what the cosmic microwave background is? Do you?
Yeah.
So it's like, the Big Bang, right? So the light from the Big Bang is still around. But because it happened so long ago, it's shifted into microwave. So it's like a star, right? For example, it's a couple thousand light years away. If at the source it's blue, we'll see it as sort of redder than it is, which is because of a thing called a Doppler shift, but that's too sciencey. But so the basic idea is if something's far enough, it'll appear redder than it actually is. And by redder, we mean that the wavelength will be longer or the energy will be lower. And so the cosmic microwave background is that sort of a thing, but for the Big Bang. So the light from the Big Bang, it's sort of become redder and redder and redder, and now it's in the microwave. So like the microwaves you use, at your home.
Yeah.
So that wavelength of light. A little, I'd say, smaller or bigger than that. But yeah, around that wavelength. And so what that helps us see is the universe in the past. So we can say, it's sort of like a photo of the universe at its beginning.
Right.
So that's the cosmic microwave background because it's photons. Photons are the things that carry light. So neutrinos are another kind of particle that are they don't interact with anything other than gravity, or so we believe right now, and the weak force. Just leave that aside for now. Just know that neutrinos don't interact with much. They just pass through most things, right?
Right.
And so the cosmic neutrino background, so this sort of image of the universe in that early stage, but in neutrinos, is much older than the one we have with photons. So it's like if the photons, so I guess, okay, do not go into too much of technical detail.
No, you can go as technical as
but
you
no,
want.
it's like I have to explain this, then this, then this, then this. So instead of that, I'll just say that the universe at its beginning was opaque, right? Because there was so much stuff that light couldn't go through. And so when the light finally came through, that was approximately, I think, 300,000 years after the Big Bang. But the neutrino background, so the neutrinos, they would have come out much earlier. By what scale? I don't really remember off the top of my head. But so we could get a much more detailed and earlier picture of what the universe was like if we discovered it. But yeah, that's it. Yeah, it's like you have to know some stuff to know other stuff, and then you get this cosmic neutrino thing. But yeah.
It's like you have one box and you open the next one and you.
Yes.
It's we interview a professor and he talks about the idea of reductionism, which is basically you take this idea and you open it up and you open it up and you open it up until you get to the most fundamental stuff, which in physics it seems to be the standard model.
Yeah.
We may not know.
Yeah, the standard model is it's a wonderful thing. It's amazing what we've been able to predict in theory before testing it out at the LHC or at Fermilab here in Illinois. But yeah.
Have you been in Fermilab?
Not yet.
You should.
Yeah.
I used to spend a lot of time there because I live about 10 minutes, 15 minutes from there.
That's amazing.
So we'd go there every weekend. And
Yeah,
it was,
I have to go there.
I think you don't. I think you can just go.
Yeah, you can just
show
go.
up.
It's open.
Yeah.
It's open to the public. So
Yeah. It's very
Yeah,
very
I
nice.
know. It's
I
very
think you
nice.
would enjoy it.
it's an amazing place.
So, did you hear about what Fermilab discovered recently about?
Yeah, the mu1, it's the G-2 problem.
What is that?
That was like a year ago, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh, that's more physics than I feel confident explaining, but I can give you sort of a big picture idea. So the mu1 is like an electron, but heavier. Pretty much the exact same properties, pretty much the exact same spin, charge, everything, but just heavier. And so you have another bigger particle, and it decays into something plus an electron, or that thing plus a muon.
Okay.
Right? And so what we initially thought was the rate at which it decays into muons and electrons is the same, but we found out that it has a preferential sort of it has preference towards electrons.
Right.
So we get more electrons than we get muons, and that sort of doesn't make sense. That doesn't align with what we believed in theory. So that's one thing they're testing out. I think that that wasn't at Fermilab. That was at CERN, but at the exact same time.
Right.
At the Fermilab, they were measuring the magnetic moment of the muon, I think. So the magnetic moment is just like an intrinsic sort of magnetism a particle has. And so there are currently like sort of 3 theoretical predictions, right? And they all differ at the 7th or 8th decimal place. And so it's like statistically insignificant, but it's on the border of being significant. So it's like if we get like a little bit more of a variation, that means that we have a completely new result. And so the initial theoretical prediction was sort of from looking at all these experiments. It's like, what did they measure in this experiment? What did they measure in this experiment? And then you take a sort of average. Mm-hmm. And the result they found for this at Fermilab experimentally was different from what this thing predicted. Now, another approach is sort of just do it like with brute force, like take into account, well, this particle does this particle does this particle does this, so this particle has to do this. And so that's what sort of they were trying to do, but because the initial prediction was like, 30-40 years ago, they didn't have the computational power to do it. But the new theoretical prediction, which they do have the computational power to do, matches sort of the result that they got at Fermilab. But the majority of the scientific community sort of still believes in the first result. So it's like sort of, well, who's right? So now they have to do more experiments. So it's like, I'm stealing this analogy from 60 Symbols, which is a really amazing YouTube channel. And so it's like you have a soup of vegetables. That's all these particles, all this quantum stuff, everything, right? Now, when you shoot a muon through it, you sort of know what's supposed to happen through all your math. But that's not what's happening. There's something else in that soup, and that's what they're trying to find. What they found at Fermilab. But yeah.
What do you think about the current state of physics? Because physics seems to be in a deep depressions for almost a couple decades. Meaning, since Einstein, we found general relativity, and then we found quantum mechanics, and then they do not, come together. Einstein spent so much time working on the unified field theory of the theory of everything.
Yeah.
And he's been working on that. I mean, he spent his entire life working on that. He didn't make much progress. People after that, string theory, and we have Carlo Rovelli, which these things, and Wolfram. So many theories. Eric Weinstein, he has some theories as well. I don't know if you know who that is. So we have so many theories. We still don't know what do you think of the what do you think of the current state of physics? Because we seem to be in this deep depression, but also, how do we get out? Is it worth thinking about the theory of everything? Is that something we should think about? What do you think?
Okay, so I'd say first thing is that physics isn't stagnant at all. We've had a lot of development since, quantum theory, say. And so, okay, the best example I can think of the top of my head is do you know Roger Penrose? And do you know Stephen Hawking? Do you know their singularity theorem? Right? So it's basically just, if a black hole works this way and collapses into a singularity, the universe should also collapse into a singularity, right? That was in the 60s, I think. And that was like revolutionary in terms of black hole physics. And it was very fundamental physics, right? So that was a new thing that was done after sort of this boom in the early 20th century of quantum mechanics and general relativity. Then that was disproven or sort of argued against because of what quantum mechanics does. and then there was that, and then there was that. And so it's like, it's very technical now. The stuff that's coming out of physics isn't as universal or as generally applicable as general relativity and quantum mechanics were. And so that's why you might think, oh, you haven't had any big sort of thing in physics for a while. But you had a lot of things. For example, the standard model, that's pretty much been developed over the past, like the 20th century and the 21st century. And another reason that people sort of think that there's this stagnation could be that experimental physics and theoretical physics are very, very far apart now. They were very close initially, right? Like theories that were made in the 1700s or 1800s were testable in the 1700s and 1800s, right? Like Newton's theory of gravity or Newton's optics, stuff like that was testable in his time. And so you could sort of, come to conclusions then and there. It's like, oh, I have this proposal, I tested it, it matches, so yes, this is the sort of way the world works. But we can't do that right now. So for example, all this stuff about black holes, right? We haven't gotten anywhere near a black hole. We can't observe a black hole directly, like go close to it and observe it. And so it's like, all these theories, for example, Hawking radiation, right? It's very, very widely believed theory. But we have no experimental evidence of it because we have no access to a black hole. And so it's sort of like, you have all these theories. How do you verify them? And that's why we haven't had sort of a conclusion yet. Because string theory, the math works out, 1 + 1 is 2. So like that's why people still believe in it, but we still don't have any experimental evidence of it. And so maybe that's the reason for the stagnation. And I guess another question that some people have is, why should we fund like theoretical physics research? How does it benefit the general public about if string theory is true or not? Why not invest that money in like making solar panels or some engineering thing that could make the world a better place? But the problem with that sort of way of thinking is we don't know how or what use it's going to have until we have it. So it's like, the Saturn V, right? The rocket for Apollo 11. The fuel pumps they use in that are used as sort of like a modified version of those is used as like heart pumps today. Like no one at that time thought that, oh, the engineer who made that pump didn't think that I'm making this pump to take us to the moon. That's going to be used sort of to help like in medicine a couple of years later. No one thought of that, but it is used, right? Same thing with sort of like the internet, right? It was invented at CERN, Tim Berners-Lee, right? He didn't invent it so that we could watch YouTube videos or like use Google Docs. But that is the use of that came out of that. And so it's like the byproducts that are made along sort of this, as you go through this like path of research, as you fund this research, is what's going to be useful. If we don't know what's there, we can't really sort of speak to its benefit to humanity, so to speak.
How do you get people excited? Because you talked about that it's more theoretical now, right? We're not getting like instant gratification for anything that we're coming up with. So for the people who are going to grow up to become physicists or who are just interested in the subject, how do you think how would they get interested in this?
That's a good question. Because the thing about physics is it's very easy to get someone interested in it. You just show them a couple of demos, you show them like, oh, black hole does this, the star does this, and they get interested. The difficulty, in my opinion, is getting them past that initial point. Because physics is a whole lot of math. It's basically just math. And what people... So on the time when people have to make this decision, right, of, yes, I want to do physics, it's usually around the end of high school by the time they get into college. The thing is, in high school, they don't really teach you much actual physics, right? You don't really do any sort of calculus with physics. You don't really do much of the math around the physics. You just play with the concepts. And so that's a shock that scares a lot of people out of physics. It's like, they come into university. It's like, oh, I studied mechanics in high school. Let's see what it's like now. I did well in that. I should do well in this college level course. But they take that course and it's like, oh, what's this? Why are they using this thing here? I didn't know this was here. And so that sort of scares them because a lot of people don't associate math and physics, right? They're basically the same thing in a lot of sense. Physics is applied math. But because people don't associate sort of the difficult or technical part of physics with actual physics, that's what scares people out of physics. So then the question, to answer the initial question, it's pretty easy to get people excited about physics. Just show them what physics has done. Just show them what you know about the world, right? That's what fascinated me. But I'd say, more relevant question is how do you keep them in physics?
Right.
Because it's a very specialized field now. If you want to do anything in physics, you sort of have to spend a lot of time getting to the point where you know enough to do something. And so that's the sort of, I'd say, problem we have to think about.
Yeah, and I think a lot of YouTube channels have like Veritas is like a great one, and I think some people are getting interested in physics. I think the part a lot of the times happens is that the money question comes, like the job question comes, and when people are thinking, oh, like I'm gonna do physics, and like people are like, oh, what job can you do? And like that's not the question. Like, that's a bad question. It's a bad framing because when you do physics, you don't. That's not the purpose to make money or to get a job because of like physics in itself is about understanding the universe and everything else, and like you don't care, like money and these things are just like things we made up in a way, and physics are like the things that are there already. We need to find the good questions to see the mysteries of the universe.
I mean, it's relevant. It's not a bad question. It's not an irrelevant question.
No, but like when people ask like, oh, like I want to do physics. I guess like people I know who like doing physics, those people are like they're not thinking about getting a job. Otherwise, they would be doing a CS minor or like some CS thing. For the most part, like generalization, right? I do think there's people who like CS and stuff. Like for a lot of people are like, okay, why do they do engineering or these things? And like, oh, good job, like good money, whatever. But people who look do physics, like, and they finish because they must really like it because it's not easy, like you said, a lot of math and as you're seeing right now.
But yeah, I think the problem is a lot of people, you don't know that many people who are doing physics for a job, right? And so your worldview is confined to, well, if I do engineering, there's this job right there. It's pretty easy. It's go from A to B. And so I think that's the problem with a lot of people who ask this question of, well, what will you do for money? What will you do for a job? There is stuff to do, right? If you get into physics, you'll probably find a job somewhere doing something because all this stuff you learn isn't just like useless. But the point is that people don't really know that this stuff exists because they've never been exposed to that side of the world. And so it's like, oh well.
Right.
I don't know about this. So it must be, just because I only know that there's job category A, B, and C, there is no job in category D. I think that's the problem a lot of people have when they ask this question of what will you do?
Right, and there is in fact a lot of people like doing those type of things. You talked about worldviews and perspective. How will your worldview change if you find out we live in a simulation?
I think it wouldn't matter to me because the answer to if we live in a simulation is the same question as asking, is there a God, right? Because it hasn't affected me until now, right? It hasn't affected my day-to-day life. Whether God exists or not, it's not going to affect me in my life tomorrow, right? I'm still going to try to find out how the universe works. And so it's the same question. If we live in a simulation, I'm going to try to find out how this simulation works. If I'm able to, get contact with something outside the simulation, I'm going to ask, well, how does that work? So my question is, why does this happen, right? Doesn't matter where we are or like if there's something else. The question sort of extends out to, whatever level you want to go to. So it's like we're in a simulation, right? How does this simulation work? Well, now I know this is a simulation. Now I know how this works. Well, how does the world outside the simulation work? That sort of thing.
Do you have any assumptions? Assuming we indeed live in a simulation, what would be some of the reasons, if you had to guess?
The reason for the simulation?
Yeah, let's say like you meet someone. Let's say I am one of the people, the ambassadors of the simulation, and I'm trying to talk to people as a way to find out, to see if some people will get the code of the simulation. And I'm trying to prevent people like you from getting the code of the simulation. Make sense?
Yeah. Okay.
So what would be the what would be some of the assumptions?
So I guess I can start. So one of the sort of base assumptions you need to make if you're in the simulation is the people outside the simulation, you can't know how they think. Because we are nowhere close to creating something like that, right? So it is sort of stupid. It's not stupid. Stupid is a harsh word. It's not very logical to try to, get into the head of the person who's made the simulation, if they're a person at all. Because we don't know if they interact like us. We don't know if they think like us. We don't know if they have a social structure. We don't know if they need a social structure. We don't know if they're carbon based, if there is such a thing as carbon outside the simulation. And so it's like, if you know you're in a simulation, right, then your sample size becomes 1. You only have the example of one world that this person who created the simulation created, right? And so you can't sort of extend out your assumptions from this one sample to sort of over like the superset. And so it's like, if they don't want me to have the code, right, then they made a simulation, they can just delete me. And if maybe, okay, then an argument to that would be, well, what if they can't control how the simulation works? They just started it. Then the answer would be, well, it depends on what their purpose was while creating the simulation. Have you seen or read the book called Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy?
I have not. But
I've heard about
it.
Yeah. So one of the premises in that is the ultimate answer to everything in the universe is 42. But they don't know the ultimate question. And to find the ultimate question out, they create Earth, sort of an organic supercomputer, to sort of come up with the question as the Earth evolves. And so it's sort of like that. So if we were created for something like that, right, maybe us figuring out the code is part of why they created the simulation, to see how we discover the code, if we discover the code, what we do when we discover the code. And so it's like, yeah.
Do you think this, like, just thinking about if we live in a simulation or not, do you think that fosters nihilistic thoughts in you?
I mean, even if we don't live in a simulation, I know the scale at which we humans exist. It's pretty irrelevant.
Right.
And so my sort of base view is that we don't really matter. We don't have a purpose in the world. So make of it what you will, because you're your own jet. At the end of the day, when you're sort of on your deathbed, the only person whose feelings are going to matter is yours, right?
Right.
So you do with yourself what you will. If the thought that you have a purpose makes you feel better, go for it. And so I don't think that, so if someone says, oh, we're living in a simulation, nothing matters, and they do like bad things, that's not on the fact that it's a simulation, that's on them. You are processing that information in a way that results in them doing harm to others, if that makes sense.
Right.
So it's like, don't blame your mindset on the scenario, on the worldview, because the worldview is there. It's the same for everyone, right? The scenario, the stage is the same for everyone. What you do on the stage, that's up to you. How you process that information, that's up to you. So if I suddenly discover that we live in a simulation, oh, nothing matters, and I kill 1 billion people, that's not because the world is a simulation. That's because I thought that because it doesn't matter, I can do this. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's sort of difficult to put into words.
Then
Yeah.
that raises the question about free will, right? So what do you think about that? Do you think we have free will? Like, forget about simulation, let's just say in general.
Okay, so how do you define free will?
I would say free will is what, like, there is no set course for how things are going to happen. And even though I wouldn't say free will is when you think, okay, if I wanted to jump right now, I could just jump, and that's free will because I'm choosing to do it. But I'm not saying that's free will. I'm saying true free will would be when the future isn't set, and like there's no way of predicting what your next step would be. Like it's genuinely random, like a genuinely random set.
Okay, so if you say there's no way to predict, you mean that it only depends on me, what goes on inside my head, right?
Right.
What I do, no one else can predict it. But so for example, if I have thought A, why did I have thought A? It's because I observed my surroundings.
Right, you have external stimuli too.
Exactly. So if there is a way to study that external stimuli and sort of study all the stimuli that's come before it, maybe there's a way to predict your actions. I mean, they're not controlling you, right? They're just sort of working out the math and saying, oh, this person's probably going to do this. right? And you maybe do this because, okay, so very, very rudimentary example. If I sort of punch at you, you're going to dodge, right? I didn't physically get into your head and make you dodge. That was just a reaction you had to what was an obvious sort of, like it's an obvious reaction, right? I punch you, you dodge. And so, say there's a person standing here who sees me sort of getting my hand up before you see it and says, oh, this person's going to dodge, and then you dodge. Did that person control you? No. They just predicted your actions. So, the fact that you describe free will as being sort of having an unpredictable future is not a very stable sort of assumption to make.
Right.
Like not a very, how should I go? It doesn't fit your idea and your definition of free will don't coincide. And so the idea of free will is how do you ever prove that what you did was your own will and not someone else's?
Right.
Right? And if you have an unprovable hypothesis, untestable hypothesis, I don't think there's much point to it. Like there's no point in sort of creating a problem on your own and then suffering from that problem, right? It's an untestable hypothesis. So what's the point in me making myself and others around me worried about the hypothesis and sort of having a detrimental effect on everything else? It's like if I think about free will and I come to a conclusion there is no free will and I don't do anything with my life, right? That's wasted potential for something that's, not necessarily true. And so unless until you can, like, without a doubt prove that there is or there isn't free will, I think it's just sort of a fun thought experiment. Like you think about it for fun when you have nothing else to do, but you shouldn't really let it affect your actions.
But I mean, isn't that the case for like many things that you never really know that if you'll be able to prove it or not? Like, but that shouldn't stop you from asking the question.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It shouldn't stop you from asking the question, but you should know when to sort of, I guess, yeah. I wanted to say stop asking the question, but that sort of goes against my philosophy.
Right.
Because I think, you should always ask questions. But, that's a good thought. Let me think for a second. Okay, so, free will. If the only things I can think about is the scenarios in which we know we have free will or we don't know we have free will. I don't know. I find it hard to think of the circumstance in between just because of how I think about things, which is sort of like, oh, well, I don't really care. I have thought about this a lot before when I was sort of the mind that it would matter if we had free will or not. But now that we sort of, at this point in my life, I'm of the opinion that it doesn't really matter if we have it or not. And so it's a very good question you asked, but you're asking it to the wrong person because to myself, free will isn't really sort of, it's not on my list of priorities, right?
Right.
And so, I don't know, I'd probably have to think about it for a while before, I'd probably have to write it down or something to sort of get to an answer for it. But yeah.
But regardless of free will, like take out free will, put it in the trash, never think about it. There are many things that have a similar nature, meaning they are untestable hypotheses, and they will be that way unless we try. And for a lot of them, we are going to keep trying, and perhaps we're going to find out that it is indeed an untestable hypothesis, and perhaps we're asking the wrong question. But we don't know which one is the right question so how can we think about such untestable hypotheses? Because free will is an example, but there are many things in the world that are like that. So does that mean we should never think about the things that we cannot test? Or
I have a very simple criteria for that. Okay. So you have a hypothesis, right? So you make some base assumptions about it, right? And if those assumptions, the nature of those assumptions make it untestable, then there's no point in thinking about it. But if the reason for the untestability, if that's a word, is our limitations in technology or our cognitive abilities, then definitely we should think about it. So I guess one example would be, have you heard of the sort of many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, right? So the point of that is that each universe is independent, right? There's many, many, many worlds, but each of them independent from the other. Now, so that means that there is no way that we can interact with another world, right? Because if we can, then it's not another world. It could just be the same universe, just really, really far apart. And so that sort of has an untestability within its assumptions. So if you have two independent systems, right, they cannot communicate with each other. So this system can never know about this system, and this system can never know about this system. If they somehow come to know about each other, that means they're not independent. And so that sort of, there's a untestability built into the assumptions of the hypothesis. So there's no point in thinking about this. But for something like free will, right, you can think about it, because it might just be that our brains aren't sort of built to comprehend or sort of get the answer to that question. Maybe some AI, like 100 years from now, might be able to get an answer to that question. And so it's good to think about, but there isn't much we can do about it now. So if there's something that you can't do much about now, but might be able to in the future, think about that question. Spend time on it, spend money on it, spend resources on it. But if there's something you know for sure, like which by definition isn't testable, then it might be a fun thought experiment, a fun idea to play with, but it shouldn't be taken too seriously.
And I think a lot of these ideas, right, that we cannot see or we cannot prove until it has to do with a lot of math that you just don't have the right math. And I do think that we do need a lot more math, because it just seems like a lot of people seem to believe that they seem to believe that, you know, like this is it, like we can, like this is it, like this is all the physics we have, or like this is all the math we're gonna have, or like, and I don't think a lot of people are thinking about, okay, like what new math do we need to invent or discover, whatever you want to say, or what new physics, like we still need to think about these questions. And we're talking about complex numbers, and complex numbers is the perfect example, because imagine if time, let's say, was complex. The definition of the past and the future and the present will just all be the same thing. Like they wouldn't be, not the same thing, but they wouldn't be a like a difference in between them. And I do think there's an interesting answer you can go, and okay, what if how we are thinking using the current math that we understand is the reason why we cannot think about these questions? Because we seem to think in this, you know, these ways, but we don't spend so much time thinking about, okay, is this the right way to think about the question? Are we using the right language? Like, for example, I spend a lot of time thinking about like the brain, right? Like it's been almost 200 years, about the 1800s, where, you know, the brain research started with like Hermann Kajal and all these people. And, you know, we made a lot of progress until the 1950s, and the computer revolution came, and, you know, Alan Turing had this model, and for some reason, brain researchers adopted this computational model, and we thought the brain was like a computer, you know, logic gates, and or just like the whole massive computation. But I just think that's deeply flawed, because I don't think the brain works like a computer by any means. And that's something I think a lot about. Like, is the reason why we don't understand the brain, or we don't make as much progress, is it because it's a language we're using? In the same way, we can apply to these things. So is that something you think about, like, or have you seen people thinking about this question of like creating new math, new physics? Where do you think?
A lot of people who are much smarter than we have asked and answered this question before. I can give you a simple example. Find out the square root of 169 in Roman numerals. Can you do it? Maybe. It'll take time. It's much simpler with Arabic numerals, right? The ones we use right now. So the tools you use to ask the question are very, very, very important. Because another example, Roman numerals are my like current favorite example to sort of explain why you need to use the right tools to answer the right questions. Try to calculate a 15% tip at a restaurant with Roman numerals. You can do it. You can definitely do it. It's just a lot harder and much more inefficient than doing with like normal numbers that we use today. And so the idea of having the right tools to sort of ask and answer the questions is definitely correct. And I think a lot of people who are working on problems today are aware of that. The problem is we don't know what form this sort of final theory of everything, or like this theory of this will take, right? We have some assumptions, but we also know that it could be something completely different from what we think it is. And so that sort of brings the idea of, if I don't know what a square root is in the first place, how do I decide whether to use Roman numerals or normal numerals, right? That's sort of like the analogy I can make. So it's like, definitely, it might be that we don't have the right tools, but it might also just be that we have the right tools, we're not using them the right way. And the base problem is our brains weren't built for this, right?
For
Our brains were built to survive in the savannas. They were built to, find food, kill animals, stuff like
well,
that.
I mean, if you believe in in like Darwinism, and I don't know, like there've been some interesting thoughts about like is that true?
I mean, yeah, definitely.
It seems to be true, but like,
Yeah.
what if it's not?
It could not be true, but okay, it's if we find a better something, that doesn't mean that Darwin was wrong. It just means that he wasn't general enough. It's like,
Well, like that's assuming a lot of this. Like, that's assuming we came from like monkeys all the way to like here, more or less.
I mean,
Like-
technically didn't come from monkeys, but
Well, like
yeah, I
so
get
sort
your-
of
I
like
get your point.
primate.
I get your point. Yeah.
Common
Common
ancestors.
ancestors. Yeah.
Yeah. But what if you didn't? Like, what if you just?
We did. We have evidence to prove it. We've seen intermediate steps. We've seen this ape looks sort of similar to this ape, which sort of looks similar to this ape, sort of looks similar to us. We have that evidence, right?
Okay, maybe I'm just being ignorant, but how about like other animals?
Okay, so the thing is, evolution is a very sort of well-tested theory, right? Because, for example, wings, right? Insects have them, bats have them, birds have them. All three of them develop them in different ways, right? The wings of an insect are very different from the wings of a bat, are very different from the wings of a bird. But
Can
they
you
all
show me?
serve.
Okay.
But they all serve the same purpose, right?
Yeah.
And so it shows that organisms adapt, at least on Earth, adapt to their environment and sort of evolve in that way. It's like whoever adapts best survives the longest. And so that sort of, I think, is the best proof of Darwinism or like the evolution theory. There might be some tweaks that need to be made to it, but the general premise of, well, the reason we are the way we are is because our environment was such.
Right. So we were talking about similar question last week, and he asked the guy we were talking to, like, how would you visualize negative the square root of -5? You can't.
You can't.
So how would you? But someone had to make the step of like Roman numerals to numbers. How would you, if you had to think about the question, how would you actually transition from like say Roman numerals to like this and like okay, like of course when you take the square root of 4, it's 2. You don't have to do like weird stuff with Roman numerals, right? So how would you think about the question of actually creating new tools? And when something you said about the tools, Marshall McLuhan said, we make the tools and the tools make us back.
So, okay. The first sort of step or the first sort of impetus to making new tools, and by tools I mean like sort of just methods we use to do something, understand our environment, is finding out the limitations of your current tools, right? If I have a wrench, that's called a wrench, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I want to hammer a nail. I can do it with a wrench, but I can realize, oh, there's a much more efficient way to do it. There's a hammer I can use. So I make the hammer. So it's sort of like that. It's
So like for this example, like negative square root of -5.
yeah, it's a limitation of our current system of numerals, right? And it's a limitation of a reality, so to speak, because there is no example of a negative root, right? You have 0, I have nothing. You have 1, I have something. You have -1, I owe you something. But you have no negative square root of 1. Like there is no real physical example of it, right? And so that's the sort of limitation we have with imaginary or complex numbers. And so the reason complex numbers are so useful is that they're a good way to represent stuff. They don't necessarily correspond to how stuff really is. They're just a really good way to represent it and work through it. So going back to the idea of how do you sort of come up with new tools, it's just you find the limitations of your old tools and sort of think about why did this limitation arise? How does this relate to the sort of fundamental nature of what I'm using to come to this conclusion? It's like, well, yeah, I guess that's about it. Find the limitations of your tools and sort of figure out why you have these limitations, and then you can maybe work towards creating something new.
Right, but it doesn't necessarily mean that what we find actually makes sense, right? For example, something that comes to my mind is for relativity. Like Einstein had that constant in the equation, right? And he thought that like he just put that so that the equation would make sense, but he didn't believe in the constant. He was like, this, I don't know what this is, but eventually it was proved that how important the constant was, right? So you sometimes end up with something really revolutionary and something really important from what you're missing, but sometimes what you find might not make sense. So like how would you know if what you found is actually like a quantity that is important to this, or something that we could harness to like maybe propel the subject forward, if that makes sense.
So, the problem with the cosmological constant that Einstein got in general relativity was that it was not testable at the time.
Right.
Right. But another thing is that constant doesn't change how general relativity works. It just changes the sort of way the universe works, in essence. So it's like people who learn general relativity today and people who learned it like 30 years ago before we knew the importance of the cosmological constant, they learn the same thing, right? It's just a constant. It just shows that the universe is expanding at this particular rate or this thing. So there's that. And a lot of the times the limitations like this constant thing arise because you cannot verify your theories. You have a theory, you don't have the observational evidence to back it. So you just sort of keep it in mind, work with what makes sense right now, and sort of go along. Again, if you come, so for example, I have this thing, this theory, this equation, right? I have this particular constant in it that doesn't make sense to me right now, but the math makes sense. So I say, well, maybe I can just remove it for now and apply this to what I made it for. Works. It doesn't work on this thing. Well, why doesn't it work? Maybe I'll put the constant back. Oh, now it works. So it's sort of like that. It's like you shouldn't expect to know everything all at once. It's a process. It's like, if this doesn't make sense now, keep it in mind, but move along. Maybe if something else doesn't make sense and you put those two together, maybe they might make sense. It's sort of like that. So it's sort of not very, you can't make assumptions about what you have right now unless you know like sort of everything about it. It's like general relativity, right? We didn't really know everything that would match up. We didn't know. Like, it was very sound. It was a good theory. But we didn't know that it would match everything. Like, all of the predictions it makes in theory would match all of the observations we get, right? And so just because we didn't know that, we didn't throw the theory away for other ones. So that sort of thing. Until you can prove it wrong, you use it.
Do you think we'll ever, like we talked about human limitations about the brain, right? Like we cannot, there are some things like our brain just cannot comprehend at this point. Like, for example, complex numbers. Do you think will there ever be a point where our brains evolve to understand these concepts? Like, it would be something that they teach in like first grade to children, right? Or like a lot, like the progress for science is also limited by how much we as humans can understand it. Like we didn't evolve to like make rockets to go to the moon, right? We just happened to do that. If you just look at other animals, they're not going to a university like we are, or
That we know of.
that we know of, sure. But they have their own purpose in life, and we found our own. And it wasn't necessarily what evolution showed us, but it's something that we just came to be. So you think that there'll always be a factor in stopping us from ever reaching our true potential in like solving the mysteries of the universe, or just coming across and comprehending more of these like complex concepts?
I mean, maybe that could be it. Maybe we just get to sort of a point and it's like, well, this is it. You can't understand anymore. This is sort of like a full stop on human exploration. But then the question is, that assumes that we're not going to change ourselves, right? I mean, we know computers do a lot of things better than us, right? We know that a chess AI will play chess better than any human ever can. So it's sort of like that. Do we upgrade ourselves to sort of... So, for example, in the future, 100 years in the future, you can choose to change your brain out. You can choose to upgrade certain parts of it. So you can be like, oh, I'm a physicist, so I need this particular thing, so I'll upgrade my brain with that. I'm an engineer, so I need this particular thing, so I'll upgrade my brain with that. That assumes that humans won't artificially improve ourselves. Gene editing is already a thing, right? And so we know that we are going to change ourselves. We are sort of getting to that place where humans and sort of computers are intersecting, right? Like recently there was someone who's like completely paralyzed, but they use like a chip in their brain to sort of, I think, type something or something along those lines. And so humans and sort of machines, to put it very, very roughly, are sort of combining. And so we know that we have ways to improve ourselves. We sort of know what path we could take. And so I think the question of whether it is a limitation, a human brain is a limitation, but I think we can overcome that limitation given enough time, with how we're sort of evolving and how computers are evolving and how sort of both of them together are evolving. On that topic, a great book to read is Homo Deus by Yuval Noah Harari, I think. He's the guy who wrote Sapiens, which is also a very good book. And another thing, it's very relevant to us, but today at like, I think 7:30, a guy called David Brin, who's a science fiction author, a very sort of, I'd say, important guy, serves on a lot of NASA committees and stuff, is giving a talk on, what's it called? Human augmentation and AI and stuff like that at Spurlock Museum.
Oh, really?
Where he's coming to?
Today at 7:30.
How do you find out?
Oh, I got an email. So.
Oh, okay. Well, are you like part of some email list? Like, I'm asking because I don't get these emails. So.
Yeah. So he gave a talk yesterday on the Fermi paradox and the astronomy department. So
Also, like, he just here, like, just flexing on people.
he's a smart guy.
No, I'm kidding.
But yeah. So they sent out an email about that, and then at the talk yesterday, he said, I'm also giving a talk here.
Oh,
So,
nice.
yeah, I can send it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Where is the thing?
While you type and find my email, think about, what makes you sad these days?
I have an exam tomorrow. I have my...
No, that's not sadness. That's more concerns. Because you said you were not truly happy when I asked you a couple.
Yeah. I mean, I'm never truly happy, so I don't really... I mean, I guess I have been happier. Okay, so my definition of happiness is not like sort of set in stone. I don't understand what happiness is right now. Where it is? Just a second. What's your email? I don't have your email.
JCAM.
JCAM.
I'm not sure it show up.
There's a lot of people.
PL.
I found it, yes.
Okay. You sure?
JCampo 37.
Yeah.
Great.
And then also type ABP6.
All right, him. I have sent it to him as well. Okay. But yeah, so what makes me sad? I think it's correct to say that my exams sort of make me the closest thing to sad. ABP or APB?
AVP.
ABP. All right, I know the name ABP. It makes sense now. Okay. Yeah. But again, so what makes me sad? I don't know the answer to that question. I mean, there's the obvious thing.
Do you cry?
Yeah. Not as often as I'd like, but I do sometimes.
I'm not asking as you would like. So you would like to cry more?
Yeah. Because when you cry, you feel very light emotionally. I cried a lot when I was little, but when I was little, I was very, very happy. Now I don't cry as much and I'm not as happy.
So do you think there's a correlation?
Yeah, there is, definitely.
So why do you think we don't cry as much?
I don't know. Maybe I'm just more rational. Maybe I'm just like, well, it's stupid to cry over this. Like that's sort of...
Like is being rational better or what?
So for some things, yes. For some things, no. I don't make emotionally charged decisions anymore. I don't make decisions based on, like, well, I hate you, so I'm not going to do anything with you. I can't do that now, right?
You can? Or you...
I can, but I shouldn't. It's not...
Why not?
Because you are a very important person in my field, right? So it's like, well...
Yeah, I know I am, but...
It's like that. It's like, I know that if I sort of let my emotions take over because of this sort of momentary thing, I'm going to regret it for a much longer period of time.
You will.
So it's like weighing pros and cons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe that's part of just growing up, I suppose.
Maybe, yeah.
You just get more, you just get sucked into the world, and so you lose touch with your spirit.
I mean, yeah, probably. But yeah, again, maybe that's something I should think about. Maybe it's concerning that I don't know what makes me sad.
Would you like to cry right now?
Not right now. I'm fine right now.
Okay.
I'm just stressed right now. Yeah.
Maybe that is part of the answer. Yeah, stress makes people cry less, which makes them which could make them.
Less happy.
Yeah, I guess I'm just not sort of. It's not as black and white anymore. It's not that I'm sad right now, I'm happy right now, I'm sad right now. It's all sort of an amalgamation of a bunch of different things at this moment. When you're a child, it's like you're either sad or you're either happy. It's not a very complex state. It's a very binary state.
But you just told me a couple of minutes ago, I don't know how long, that nothing really matters. It doesn't matter if you have free will or not. So why do you stress? Why do you worry? Why do you cry?
Because that's how my brain works. Okay, just because nothing matters doesn't affect how I think.
No, sure, but in a way it does.
Yeah, I guess in a way it does. But for me, I'm still a normal human, right? My brain still produces some chemicals.
So you don't believe that nothing matters. You don't believe
I
these
believe
things
that
affect you.
I believe that nothing matters, but they do affect me, right? They matter to me, but not in the grand scheme of things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
It's like I'll get sad if I have a fight with someone, but nobody else cares about that. The universe doesn't care about that.
How do you know?
Maybe it does. I just don't think it does.
I do think that there has to be some sort of like ripple effect type of thing that it just like, I hit you now and you go cry and then you hit someone else and like.
Maybe.
I mean, that's pretty much what chaos theory is.
Yeah.
Is it not?
I mean,
not really, but sort of. Yeah. Chaos theory is more that if you have above a certain number of variables, the initial state affects it much more than you think. So, again, Veritasium has a really good video on this.
Yeah.
And there's also a really good book called Just Chaos. It's a pretty old book. It's from the 80s or 90s.
By who?
I don't remember the author's name.
You read it?
Yeah, it's been a while since I read it. It's been like a couple of years.
Mitchell, maybe?
Maybe.
Okay.
But yeah. And so chaos theory is just that some systems are very, very sensitive. And so you can't predict how they'll go, even if you know each and every component of it individually. But yeah.
So if we get you out and I want to tell you, okay, you want to do physics? Okay, I'm a billionaire. I'm going to give you all the money, anything you want. You're free. You don't have to go to school if you don't want to. Like I basically, I give you you're like my patronage, like or whatever. You're like my adopted kids, whatever.
Padawan.
Yeah. So like you don't have to worry about anything, right? Money, school, like stress.
You're a sponsor.
Not necessarily, but like I'm just like, hey, do whatever you want. You don't have to be part of this world. Okay. I want to create a new world for you, where you do only what you want. What would you do? What would you like to do?
That's a good. Probably just get a ton of stuff first, and then probably just do what I do right now, but with more stuff.
What do you mean ton of stuff?
What do you mean
So
by
it's
that?
like get like a big ass TV, maybe get like a good gaming PC, maybe get a good set of speakers, good set of headphones, a good bed.
So you're saying you'll fulfill all your material needs.
But yeah, I'll still do this thing that I'm doing right now.
So
Which is?
Learning more about the world.
You don't need to go to school. Or you don't need to
I like going to school.
Okay.
Yeah, I learn stuff here. So.
Okay, so like you're gonna take my money, and just like buy it on online, just like waste it online.
Yeah, maybe I'll invest some, probably, but yeah. Sure.
Where?
why? But you have all the money. Like you have.
Oh, if I have all the money, then I won't invest it. But if I have it was like here.
If it's like if you're
It
working
depends.
on a budget, then maybe.
Yeah. If I get $1 billion, I don't care. If I get $1 million, I have to think about it. So it sounds like that.
Okay, you're thinking my question too literal. Like, so
Okay,
like,
fine.
okay,
Yeah.
sure. You know, like, okay, I don't care what phone, computer you buy, whatever. Sure. Like, what I'm asking is like, what I'm trying to get to is like, what would you actually, like, if you didn't have to think about your constraints right now, which you have constraints, tests, things you have to worry about, whatever, grad school, X, Y, and Z, your family, money, bunch of constraints. What would you want to do? Like, forget about constraints. It's really hard thing to do because life in itself is about constraints.
Yeah, I just want to find out more about how the universe works. And I want to do it myself. So, I'll still study. I mean,
Like, would you still be here or would you go somewhere else? Like, remember, they're not constraints. You can go anywhere. You can talk to anyone.
maybe I'll go to a better university. But this place is pretty decent though.
Damn, that's pretty hard.
Yeah. But no, this place is pretty good for some stuff like CS, condensed matter physics. This place is like... And the astronomy department is pretty good too. They have no scandals. It's a very boring astronomy department. They only do research and do their own thing. Other places they have scandals and stuff, but yeah.
What do you mean scandals?
Or like someone was sexist, someone did this, someone stole money, stuff like that. It keeps happening.
Oh, so like you like that like those things, or?
No, I don't like
Oh, okay.
I'm happy
okay.
here. I'm
Okay,
happy at a boring
got it.
place.
Got it. I mean, I think that's the beauty of the Midwest sometimes, because it's so boring.
It's
There's nothing to
very
do that you get more productive.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
like living in Urbana versus living in Champaign.
I live in Champaign.
Okay, so where would you invest the money? Because you said like, oh, I would invest it, and you said, oh, if physics doesn't work out, I'll become a hedge fund manager, which is, it is what it is. But
But yeah,
where would you invest the money?
probably Apple stock. Some Apple stock. I don't know. Some physical gold, not gold bonds. Don't buy gold bonds because that's still with the government. So if the government fails,
Physical bonds?
No, gold, physical gold, like just a ton
Yeah,
of
yeah.
gold. Like don't buy gold bonds from the government
Yeah.
because
How about an ETF?
what's an ETF?
Okay, or how about
You mean ETH?
no. How about ETF is just basically like a mutual fund, but like
Oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe just invest in the S&P 500. Or is it 2000? What's the S&P? It's 500, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that. I don't know much about finance, but yeah. I'd probably just ask someone much smarter than me to invest it for me. So.
okay, but when you become a hedge fund manager, you're gonna just go ask someone else.
Yeah, but I'm not a hedge fund manager right now. I don't know how a hedge fund works. So.
Okay, so why did you say you wanted to become a hedge fund manager?
Because someone who sort of does that sort of thing told me that they like physicists. So I was like,
That's true.
yeah, if they like physicists and if I want money, then why not? I'll figure it out when I go there. But yeah.
Okay. Sounds reasonable.
Yes, someone who's in a position of becoming a hedge fund manager told me that hedge fund managers, like hedge fund people, like physicists.
Yeah.
And so I trusted them because they know a lot more about hedge
Well,
funds than me.
the most successful hedge fund manager ever, like investor, like ever, meaning, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think he was getting returns of like 20% since like, since you start, which is like 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Like no matter what, doesn't matter. They've just been getting insane returns, so much money. I mean, Ben Simmons, I don't know if you heard of it.
I might have.
So this guy is physicist. When he was like a genius, undergrad or grad school, he discovered something in physics or something, and he's like, so he decided to become a hedge fund manager, and he hired a bunch of physicists, programmers, whatever. They had all these models, and they make so much money, and they are indeed physicists. So you're not wrong.
There are a lot of these geniuses, like you hear stories of people like, oh, went to college at 15, got a PhD at 14. A lot of these people just end up going to like Wall Street. So, well.
Is that something that, like, what do you think of that? 'Cause like, I think of a genius, like, shouldn't they be thinking about things that are more quote unquote important, or the universe, or engineering?
I mean, I
making things
respect it.
better?
They want to use what they have to make a ton of money. So, well, like I said, it's up to the individual. I don't really.
Okay, but do you think Wall Street is the best way to make money?
Probably right now it's the
Like,
easiest. It's the easiest to get into because
come?
you don't need any capital. You don't need any labor. You don't need any
Okay, but you
sort
don't
of
need.
land or factory.
Okay, but you don't need any of those things in other things like computer science, like programming.
I mean, you need to look. I guess. I mean, you still need a sort of. Okay, so in computer science, you need a radical idea to make the sort of money that these
Not
tech
really.
giants have.
Not really.
I mean,
Okay, like how much money? How much money are we talking about? Like how much money do you think these people in Wall Street are making?
probably a couple, tens of millions at the minimum.
Okay, you can really you can make a startup, like a okay startup, and sell it for like, I don't know, 10, 20 million.
But that's a one-time thing, right? In Wall Street, the only there's nowhere to go up, and the problem with I guess
Like, what is money? Because you said you want money. What is money?
just
Because money isn't the green
No.
papers.
Just the ability to get the materialistic stuff that I want.
Okay.
So if I have a way of not sort of working to earn money and then buying that thing and getting the thing directly, I just get the thing directly. So
But like, how do you get this thing? Like, how do you get the ability? Because in a way, money is about the ability that gives you, in a way.
I mean, there's a bunch of you can just take the sort of tried and tested way. Just again, become a hedge fund manager, become a stockbroker, become an investment banker. We know all this.
But
all
like,
these things
I don't
make
think
money.
that those are the best way to make money. Like,
Maybe it's not the best way to make money,
like
but it's
who are the richest people today? Just
the tech people, yeah.
are they hedge fund people? Are they in Wall Street?
That's the thing, right? Those people had an idea that no one else had, or they implemented their idea better than most other people.
They had the courage to go forward with their
Yeah,
idea.
exactly.
So you're saying people who don't have courage, they should go to Wall Street.
Yeah, I mean, it's a safe place.
Okay.
So it's like, okay, it's not the best way to make money, but it's one of the sort of easiest and most sort of believable ways to make money. Like, you can see yourself, doing all these things and then going to Wall Street, right? You cannot see yourself becoming like Mark Zuckerberg or sort of Steve Jobs or something like
Wait,
that.
why not? Like, what's the
You
difference?
need an idea for that, right?
Okay, but so what?
So what's the idea?
Like, I don't.
That's the thing, right?
That's the thing. It's not about the idea, though. Like,
I think it's okay.
Do you think
Yeah, it's
Mark
about-
Zuckerberg was like thinking
Yeah,
of
it's
like
about
okay.
executing the idea. I
No,
get
no,
it,
no,
but-
not even that. Like, I'm not talking about like his execution. Like, I'm not saying any of that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just saying like they were just doing what they wanted to do. Like, I don't think they were thinking of like, oh, idea first and then execution and then to get an MBA. Like, they were not thinking of any of that.
Probably, but yeah. I mean, those are special cases, though. If it was that, like, sort of...
Okay, I'm not. Yes, take out the outliers. It's still people make startups and they sell it and things.
Yeah. I guess you just have to be smart about it. Like, the recent sort of boom of electric vehicles. A lot of companies came up, a lot of companies raised money. They didn't deliver. They sort of just sunk, but they still got the money. So
Yeah.
I guess it's just a
Okay,
thing of
yeah.
surveying the market at the point, like when you're getting into it. It's not a very it's not a black and white answer.
Yeah.
And I don't really know much about this stuff, so I don't like to. I mean, said a lot of science stuff that I don't know much about, but yeah, I try not to say stuff that I don't know much about.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that like I don't know, like people think of like money and like they try to go find the money, but like I feel like the economy just you make things and you sell things. Like there's not much. So like, if you want to make money, you make things. Or
I guess, yeah.
of course, there.
It's just a matter of how much effort you're gonna put into it.
There are more abstract ways of making money. Like you go to Wall Street, you trading things, and you improve the capital allocation, just all these things.
Yeah.
So anyway,
It's also a matter of like where you're coming from. For some people, it's much easier. Some people it isn't. Like if you come from a family of stockbrokers, you already have the connections you need. So it's like, again, it's a very subjective thing. Like the easiest or the best way for me to make money might not be the best way for you to make money. So I don't think there's a single answer to that.
If there was one problem that you could solve today, what would it be?
Probably climate change. Because it affects me.
Okay.
It directly affects me, right? It's like on the dark side, that was like what, today's Tuesday, so it was like 3 days ago, right? I was wearing t-shirt and shorts because I physically couldn't bear to wear anything else because it was too hot. Today, I have to wear my winter coat because it's too cold.
well, I enjoy it.
What?
I
Oh,
enjoy
no,
it.
I don't like it. I don't like it when it changes abruptly.
Yeah.
My body can't handle it. I get sort of sick. But again, the thing is, climate change is sort of, it affects all of us pretty directly, right? I mean, this might be a bad example. This might just be normal Midwest weather, but we can sort of physically see the
No,
effects.
I get what you're saying.
We can feel the effects. And so it's a very, very urgent and immediate problem, right? I mean, it's getting better, but I mean, if you could solve it today, right now, then you would see the effects immediately. So, but then the problem with that is if we solve climate change, there's going to be people who say, oh, well, climate change is solved, so we can continue doing the things we did. We can continue using the oil. We can continue using the natural gas. And so it comes back down to sort of the issue with these big questions, I think, is that you don't take into account all of the stuff around the issue, right? So, for example, just this sort of exchange. What do you want to solve? I want to solve climate change. I solve climate change. What about all the politicians? What about all the oil companies? They're still going to exist.
You fire them.
I mean, I guess. But there's going to be someone else doing something else that contributes to the problem, right?
Or you can become the decoder of the simulation and just delete them.
Maybe you could. But the thing is, it's not a very sort of monolithic thing, right? It's not that this is one block, this is one block, this is one block. Everything affects each other. And so it's like you can't take one thing out of the equation without affecting everything else. And so that's why these problems are so difficult to solve. It's because you need sort of collaborative effort to do it. One party cannot just do it themselves. Like, even if sort of all of the, I mean, I guess if all the politicians came together, they could solve it, but it's like, they're not going to come together. We know that for a fact. So,
You're certain.
pretty certain.
What would you do differently though? Let's say you have all the power.
What would I do differently? I think it's the problem with that question is I've never had the power, right?
Sure, but that's like, what are
And
the problems that you see?
If it was an idealistic world, I would just say, well, all those who are corrupt fired, all those who contribute to climate change fired, all those who do renewables do your thing. I mean, but it's not that simple, right? It's not like playing like
Right,
a
right.
game.
It's just like, it's not like you're adjusting the knobs.
Yeah, exactly.
You still have the ability. So, and whatever you say it's a collaborative effort, but you still have the power.
The thing is, how do I have that power? How do I execute that power? It comes down to that
Well,
question. Then.
that's what you need to think about.
Yeah, because okay, if my method of if the reason I have power, for example, is that I have the military under me, right? This is it's an idealistic question. I'm trying to give a realistic answer. It doesn't really fit the thing, but for example, say I take over the military, I take over the country. That's how I have the power, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I say, well, stop climate change, do this. But if someone in that military is associated with that problem, they're gonna oppose me. And if they oppose me, that disrupts the way I execute my power. If that disrupts the way I execute my power, I have no power. Sort of. Does that make sense? It's difficult to put into words, but it's like you cannot take these questions piecewise. You have to do it together. You can't do one thing and not do the other. You can't think about one thing and not about the other. It's a good thing to think about these questions because it's a good way to get started, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you tell people, well, if a child asks you, how do you solve climate change? And you tell them, well, you have to do this, then this person has to do this. They're going to get scared and they're going to be like, well, what's the point? It's too difficult. You have to tell them, well, maybe you can become the prime minister and solve this when you grow up. So you sort of have to motivate, the people who are getting into the problem, like who are new to the problem, to solve the problem.
Yeah, but,
and this is a good way of doing that.
But that's in fact the problem that has been happening because scientists have been telling people, oh, like, the cities are going to be like underwater in 5 years. I mean, I'm still waiting.
Yeah.
So, with COVID, we see, don't wear masks and like, sure, like I could understand why they were saying that. And I could understand why scientists were trying to say like, oh, New York is gonna be underwater. Like, oh my God, Miami, like underwater. Like, because that actually has the opposite effect because it makes people not believe.
Yeah, that's true.
But like, also, how do you prove it? Like, it's not
Prove
like
what?
you.
Like, do you think so when the science, I remember it was like 2010 or something, they were like, in 2015, New York would be underwater. Like, is that somewhat accurate?
Maybe. Because the problem with those predictions is, okay, I make a doomsday prediction, right?
Yeah.
You both panic and you do something about it. Doomsday doesn't happen. Other people who haven't done anything say, well, it didn't happen, so they must be wrong.
Sure, but do you think people went crazy? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think there's definitely been a change.
Okay, but like crazy enough to like prevent New York from going underwater?
To slow it down, at least. I think so. And if we continue on this pace, we might do it better. Because, for example, France, right? 80 or 90%. Okay, I'm going to look it up. I'm not going to quote percentages. I'm not going to make facts up. I will look it up. How much of France is renewable energy?
You don't like making up facts?
No. Because I know people are going to use that against me someday. So I have had way too many arguments. Okay. So France currently has...
What if what you're telling me is wrong?
What?
What if you look up is wrong? People are going to still use it against you.
Maybe it is. I'm looking at Wikipedia. Wikipedia is not a good place to cite, like officially, but it's a good place to get your facts because they cite their sources. So, okay, I'll tell you who says that. Currently, approximately, where is it? If I just... Okay, 40% of national electricity has to come from renewable sources by 2030. So currently, most of it comes from nuclear power, close to like 75 to 80%, which is said by, I will cite it.
Okay, you don't
Reuters,
have to go through.
which is cited by
All right.
Reuters. Good, pretty respectable news source. Reuters. Some people call it Reuters, I call it Reuters, but yeah. And so that's the thing, right? So a big country, pretty big country, is producing most of its energy without a very big carbon footprint.
Okay.
And a lot of EU is moving towards it, right?
Right.
And that's having an impact. America isn't quite there, but it's improving a little bit. For example, you can see how many more electric vehicles there are, right? And so that's definitely having an impact. The problem with then electric vehicles is that, where they're getting their electricity from. If that electricity is coming from coal and natural gas, then there's no point.
Yeah. So you're pretty excited about the James Webb Telescope.
Yes, I'm very
So
excited about
would
it.
you cry if the James Telescope goes live? I don't know if you're gonna do that, but like imagine it's on YouTube live stream 24/7. The James Webb Telescope is there, and you're watching the thing, and then you see an alien. Would you cry?
There's life out there.
Or meaning, the real question would be is.
I would cry if
Would
it went
you-
down.
Okay.
Otherwise, I wouldn't cry. Otherwise, I'll be excited. I'll be happy. I wouldn't cry.
And what exactly makes you excited? What exactly makes you happy about seeing these aliens?
Okay, James Webb probably won't give us evidence. I'm
okay.
just, okay, I'm gonna explain.
I know,
on that.
obviously, the James Webb is for something else.
Yeah, it might give us evidence of aliens, but.
But
I don't
like,
think
I'm
it
just
will.
saying, like, the James is just looking at something, and like, boom, we see this thing, and they like wave at us.
Yeah.
At you specifically.
I'd be excited. I'd be like, oh, why me? I'd say, I'll doubt it. I'll be suspicious. Like, I haven't done much. I'm not a very.
Listen, they may want you because you may be too dangerous trying to get the code, so they may just delete you.
Maybe. I mean, that's exciting in and of itself. They want to kill me and not anybody else. I'm special that way. So it's like, it's not, I know it's not going to happen, so I can't think much about it. But yeah, I'll probably be excited. Yeah. Okay, James Webb and me crying will only happen if James Webb goes down. That will be the only reason to connect myself and James
So
Webb.
you would cry if only bad things happen?
Probably.
You wouldn't cry if good things happen?
I've never cried of happiness up until now, I think. So it hasn't happened yet, so it might happen in the future. No, I have cried of happiness once. When someone I knew was getting married, I was like, oh, I'm happy. So I cried a little bit, but that's about it. I haven't cried in it. Yeah. Because the thing is, I don't have enough emotional investment into this stuff of what James Webb finds, right? For example, James Webb finds something, confirms a theory. I'll be like, oh, that's great. It confirmed this theory. But I didn't work on this theory, right? I don't have any tangible contribution to this theory. So I have no emotional attachment to this theory.
What are you emotionally attached right now?
That's a difficult question. Maybe like my family? I'm not sure. But that's like the obvious answer. That's not a fun answer. Myself, but that's also, I mean, it's like, what am I emotionally attached to? Not much, I'd say, outside of the general things, like my family, myself, stuff like that. Yeah.
What gets you excited about the future? Or are you excited about the future?
A little bit. Climate change isn't as bad as I thought, so we're not all going to die. That's good. We might still die.
Why do you say that? How do you know it's not that bad?
I mean, if you keep an eye out on it, if you like keep reading stuff, if you like keep sort of going deeper into it, you can see that there's a small but definite improvement. So it's like, well, we were going to die in 20 years, now we're going to die in 40 years. So yeah, that's good.
But aren't you afraid that thinking that things are going well just sets complacency in the people?
It does. It definitely does. Okay, so the thing is, I'm not going to do anything about climate change, right? I am not passionate enough about it to sort of dedicate my life to activism about climate change and trying to change things. I'm selfish that way. I'm very selfish that way. So it's like, well, I'm not going to do anything about it. Other people are going to do something about it. If they don't, we all die. That's fine. So my thought process is, I'm going to keep doing my thing. If everything works out well, if we survive, then great. If we don't, oh well. It's sort of like having no expectations make anything seem good. It's like if my baseline is that we're going to die, then if we don't die but we suffer, I'll be like, oh, at least we didn't die.
So just having low expectations so that you are always happy by whatever turns out.
Pretty much. I might not be always happy, but I'm never sort of caught by surprise. That's the thing. I don't like being caught by surprise.
Get ready. You're going to be surprised many times in your life.
Yeah, maybe. But it's like, there are very few things that I did not expect at all that happened to me.
I'm telling you. Watch out on the YouTube live stream. Might see some weird things.
Maybe.
What advice do you have for, you're young, we're still young, but what advice would you give young people in college?
I'm a young person in college. I don't think they want advice from me.
No, but like...
I'm not a very successful model for college student.
No, but like...
It doesn't matter if someone's successful or not.
Okay, fine.
As a curious person.
This is stuff that I would do if I was an ideal college student. right? It's just wake up on time, go to sleep on time, go to the gym, eat healthy, do your work on time. That's pretty much it. Just do what everyone tells you to do. It works out. It's like,
Okay,
you get the general advice of, eat healthy, exercise, like don't procrastinate, right? And you think, oh well, everyone says that, but it works. It actually works. If you implement it, it definitely makes your life better. But the problem with that is, until you experience the other side, until you procrastinate, until you eat like, I'm not going to curse, until you eat like not healthy stuff, until you sort of become obese, you're not going to realize that, oh, if I had done what was like sort of the general advice that everyone gives everyone, my life might have been better. I don't know. That's a very bad way to put it. Let me try to phrase it better. Advice for young people, right? I try to say something inspirational. I need to think for a second. Okay. Take risks. That's a very good one. That's a very inspirational one I can think of. That's the most inspirational one I can think of. Yeah. Cut out the part about me saying the previous stuff. That's not fun. That's very disorganized and boring. But yeah, take risks. That's good advice. Yeah. If you fail, you fail. Again, one more thing. When you're in college, right, get a map of your college, right? Put it on your wall. Then take a dart, throw it on the wall. You pick a building, go there, roll a dice, select a floor. Go on that floor and knock on the first person's door and ask them what they do. Because for at least in our case, we're at a very, very big university, right? We're at a very good university. So there's lots of people doing lots of stuff that's changing the world. And you're never going to get the opportunity or access to this variety of people doing this much important stuff all at once. So explore if you can. And sort of building on top of that, whenever you're thinking of, should I do this or not, the best thing that would happen is it goes well. And the worst thing that would happen is it doesn't go well and you get a good story out of it. So just do it. I don't have anything Nike on me, but just do it.
Have you done that?
Yeah.
How many times?
A couple of times.
Did it work out?
Sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But then it's like, some of it I can't say in public because it's not very family friendly. But you can just always go and say, at the end of the day, when you're sitting with your friends, you'll be like, oh, this happened to me. It's like, oh, that's a good story. And the good story happened because you took. It's like, it's much better to regret that you did than regret that you didn't. That's the sort of baseline moral I would like to convey or pass on to other young people.
It's like you regret the things that you didn't do more than the things that you did.
Yeah. And it's all very obvious stuff. It's nothing new. It's nothing very... Well, yeah, I guess I can say that. It's fine, yeah. I don't have to be special. I'm satisfied with that, yes. That's a good thought.
And then to end our section here, we have a section called overrated and underrated. Overrated and underrated. And, we ask some things. So...
You're like a proper talk show, games and everything. It's interesting. I thought it was going to be much more sort of low budget, but it's very impressive.
Oh, no. So Elon Musk buying Twitter. And the
reaction around it?
No, not him doing that, but sort of like what the signals he sends to the world.
Underrated. Because the fact that so the argument against the billionaires not using their money was, well, it's not liquid, it's all in stocks, right? Well, he can get $49 billion, so he has the money, it's liquid enough. So the billionaires don't have the excuse of, well, all my money is in my stocks, I don't have any liquid money. So that's a good sort of, I think, takeaway from this that people aren't looking at. Like, they can mobilize their cash if they want.
But is that necessarily a good thing for humanity or the world?
Okay, so it could be, because now, so we were asking, right, well, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, they have hundreds of billions of dollars. Why aren't they doing anything with that money? And the argument that the people supporting them made, well, it's their net worth, it's not actual physical hard cash, so they can't use that money, they don't have that much money. But we can see that Elon Musk does have that much money. He does have $49 billion to sort of give Twitter. And so it's like, now the excuse that they can't mobilize their assets is not. It's still there, but it's not as sort of ineffective an argument as it was before.
I mean, I think it's always been there. I mean, he didn't get like 49 billion like cash.
But
He's getting like debt and stuff.
But the
like
fact that he can mobilize that amount of money, that's what's important.
Yeah. I mean, like it's not like he's just buying like a yacht. He's buying like an investment in bankers like they.
And he's converting its Tesla stock to Twitter stock. So, but Twitter's going to go private. So that's also, and if you have money in Twitter, you should. I don't
Is
know
that
if you-
confirmed though? Like I read about it, but
Yeah, it's confirmed. He's going to buy it.
no, not Twitter. The Tesla going private.
No, not Tesla. Twitter's going to go private
Twitter.
Oh, Twitter is gonna.
because he's going to be the sole owner. If he's the sole owner,
Do whatever he wants.
exactly.
He mentioned making the entire code open source.
Yeah, we'll see. It's not going to make much of a difference because again, no one's going to want to move on from Twitter. So yeah.
One last question we have for you.
Quickly.
Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Yeah.
Underrated, overrated.
Overrated. He's not as good of a science communicator as people think. He's just sort of the loudest voice in the room. That's why he's so popular. He's a smart guy and he's done a lot for science communication, but I think he's nowhere near what like sort of Carl Sagan was, which is who people compare him to sometimes.
Or maybe Feynman in a way. Not
Sort of, not
They
really.
don't really
Yeah.
compare, but they do people who like
Yeah.
they go talk.
Yeah,
They should also like do research maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Again, he's a good science communicator. I just personally don't like him that much because he's not that good of a science communicator once you sort of get into it. But yeah, if Neil deGrasse Tyson sees this, I'm gonna sort of, no, he has a lot more power than me, so I'm gonna die. But yeah, at least professionally, no more physics for me, only hedge fund management. But yeah,
That's all right.
You think he would be scared of you?
no, he won't be scared of me, but all his fans will sort of come at me.
Okay.
If his fans come at me, I'm one single cowardly person. What can I do?
Oh, you don't know. I mean, you have good you're at
Oh,
your
well,
power.
that is true. Oh well, we'll see.
All right. Thank you so much for coming and
Thank you
talking
for
to
having
us.
me.
And
Yeah, it was a.
hopefully you actually get to do your research stuff and now go to this famous street. And yeah, hopefully we can see you and you become whatever you want to become. And
Yes.
and it's exciting.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a very sort of. It wasn't a very organized talk. I just spilled a lot of stuff. Hopefully people can make sense of it.
Well, I mean, it's also like we didn't ask you to make a whole speech. It was just it's a conversation.
Yeah, it is.
So you just gotta say what's on your mind. And
Yeah, that
that's-
one. Yeah, it feels weird not having a structure to.
Well,
Something like
because you actually get to say what you mean and now what you want to say and
Yeah,
know why other people want to hear.
You don't get time to prepare.
Yeah. Okay, we'll quickly end this. Someone else has to say, so I
So-
don't want to interrupt them.
Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed listening to our conversations about untestable hypotheses and general relativity and just incomprehensible concept that we come across in everyday lives. We think there's something to always be excited about the future, and there's a lot we need to learn. And I think this comes up in every episode that we do, that there's just so much that we don't know, and this just talking to people gives us a sense of what they are thinking and what we are missing out on. So something which Arya brought up today is to never stop asking questions, and which I think is something the three of us like deeply believe in. So always be curious, ask questions, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.